We have two of us in two people here that are in DC, one in New York, Minneapolis, and Houston. Is that right? So who has the best weather? Anybody want to like argue for that title?
DC is
Are
not getting it today. It is a rainy day and a rainy week.
Yeah,
And
it
we
should
have we have wildfires up here too, so we've got air quality alert. It's nice, but it's like our kids at daycare aren't going outside today because the air quality is too poor for that.
See, the thing is, all of you have, I live in Houston, and all of you have like excessively high expectations. And so, so I'm comfortable saying we have amazing weather in Houston today because it's less terrible today than it was yesterday. And that's amazing for us.
We have people joking in the comments already. A barge at the Pelican Island Causeway in Galveston.
Hey, everyone joining. This is producer Brennan in the background here. I want to say hi to Roger, Aaron, Benny. What's up, Brent, Connor, David. What's up, David? Eric, how we doing? Gene, Katie, Pam. What's up, Peter? So we're going to get started here. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. If it's urgent, I will speak up and let the panelists know today. But otherwise, we're going to save it for the Q&A portion. So I'm going to first of all pass it over to Rakesh here.
Hello, everyone. Peter, in the audience, you just informed me of something that the causeway to Galveston was hit by a barge. My son is in Galveston today with his class visiting Moody Gardens. So that's actually very relevant to my family. Anyway. My name is Rakesh, and I'm the founder and CEO of SnapStream. It's great to see everyone here. We're going to be doing this webinar today on how to run a war room as we head up to the elections. I'll give some background on SnapStream and myself. I started SnapStream with a friend of mine nearly 25 years ago. And we've been in a couple of businesses since we started the company. It's always revolved around television in one form or another. We had a consumer product before, but what we do today is we help our customers harness the power of moments. So we are how a lot of organizations take long videos and find the moments that matter within those videos and then publish those moments to their audiences. And you know, this is not something that's hard to relate to today, as short form video is so prevalent and so dominant across, you know, every place where we spend our time. So we know that moments are powerful. They allow people to punch above their weight and get a lot greater reach. We're going to hear today from a group of people that you know, one way or the other, all harness the power of moments to advance their respective missions. And so I'm excited about that. And I'll let everyone introduce themselves as we get into this. So at this point, I am going to hand it over to Brian Stelter. And Brian, give everyone some background, and please. And Brian is going to set the stage for us. Brian is someone who is, I think, you know, very tuned into beyond the surface level of what's happening in the world of news and media. He's very attuned to what's happening at a higher level. And so I'm really excited to have him set the stage for us in this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm the opening act here before Murphy and Aaron and Curtis take it away and share their experiences and take your questions. But I was thinking today as the newest SnapStream ambassador about how much I wish I had this technology 20 years ago, and how far we've come in being able to understand and digest and share what's happening across the media world. You know, this is clips from the war room today, and you know, I feel like I was running my own little war room in the mid 2000s when I launched a cable news blog called TV Newser, which covered CNN, Fox, and MSNBC back when I was in college. I had absolutely no way to actually monitor what was going on the channels. There was no media monitoring software. There was hardly any DVRing back then. It was very hard to keep track of what was going on. So I would get messages from my readers saying, did you hear what happened on MSNBC just now? Did you see what happened on Fox? The answer was usually no, I didn't. And oftentimes the networks didn't even want those clips to be seen if they were embarrassing moments or scandalous moments. The point is that there was very little access to the kind of television that we now have access to and frankly take for granted. So that was me as a blogger 20 years ago. Then I worked at the New York Times, then jumped to CNN. And all of a sudden I was on the air and I was being clipped. I think I've been clipped by a couple of the panelists here. And I became very fluent in this culture and this language. This really is a language, the way that we can communicate by sharing moments with people in real time and a little bit later. At CNN, I'll tell you, because I'm probably the only person here talking who does a lot of these TV hits, who puts on the makeup, who shows up at these networks. TV can feel very fleeting. When you're on the air as a host or as a guest, it can feel very ephemeral. Like it happens and then it just disappears into the air, into the broadcast airwaves or down the cable pipe. You can be on national television in front of 2 or 3 million people, and then a moment later, it feels like it's been forgotten. It's gone. It's disappeared. And to me, that it was a very frustrating feeling at times when I was at CNN. And I would host a show. I'd spend all week getting ready for it, trying to put on the best hour I could. And then you kind of feel like it disappears. And so every week, one of my strategies was to try to get the show to live on longer, to matter for more than an hour, to be relevant a day or two later, to have people listen to it and tune in again later. And that brings me to this conversation about clips, because the way to do that, the way to keep the show alive, the way to make it worth my guests' time and attention and energy was to make sure we were clipping and sharing and keeping the show alive that way. I think about it now as a guest. I'm going to go on CNN and NBC later today. If you're on for 2 or 3 minutes, you might spend 2 or 3 hours getting ready and getting to the studio and all of that. You want to make it worthwhile, right? You want to make it time well spent. Being able to clip and share and extend the message and extend the live shot, all of that is really essential. And so that's the point of view that I wanted to share from someone who's sometimes in front of the camera and creating some of the content that gets clipped. It's that this function of coming up, of distilling the most valuable moment, of taking 10 minutes of a video and finding the best 30 seconds, it's a really valuable and vital function, including for the people that are on the air. I was just sitting with Paula Reed of CNN. We were talking about SnapStream, and she said how valuable it was when she was in the White House press briefings and she would see the questions she asked get clipped while she's still in the briefing room. And what a kind of magical moment, what a magical feeling that is when you feel like the question you asked is actually relevant and getting an answer and getting it shared around the world in this way. I feel like we spend so much time as a society talking about the downsides of social media, the toxicity, all of the problems that we're aware of, from TikTok to Instagram and X and so on. But this idea of being able to clip and share, being able to make a moment last, being able to reach 10 or 20 or 50 million people with a video clip that you've perfectly condensed, that's real power. And that's the real upside, I think, to this social media culture and environment. Whether you're a guest or a host, whether you're in front of the camera, or whether you're behind the computer screen and figuring out what the most newsworthy moment was, what the most buzzy quote was, what the most frankly scandalous or controversial comment was. That function, it plays a real critical role in our news ecosystem and in our political ecosystem today. So that's the way I've seen it as someone looking through both sides of the camera lens. But I'm eager to hear from our panelists as they approach the 2024 election and how they're using the software for themselves. So I'll punt it back to you, Rakesh.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And yeah, it's true. It's such a different environment today versus, we've been around for quite a while as a company, and there was there was like having TV clips online was a rarity. In fact, there were a bunch of businesses like Gawker that really grew their traffic by playing this arbitrage in the absence of clips online, putting clips online. So yeah, we're in a vastly different place in 2024. Okay, we're in a vastly different place in 2024 because of this group right here, who are some of the people that are really setting the narrative in the media around what's happening in politics in particular. So we're going to go around a few minutes each to just have you hear from each of our panelists, and we're going to start with Aaron. Aaron is if you spent any time on Twitter, needs no introduction. He's sort of the Clipper, Twitter's Clipper, and so I'll turn it over to you, Aaron, to give some of your background as an independent journalist, and share with us what you do.
Sure. So I'm Aaron, and these days I'm the publisher of a newsletter on Substack called Public Notice. I started using SnapStream back in 2017 when I was at Think Progress, and a lot of people probably got to know my work when I left Think Progress for Vox, and I was at Vox through the 2020 campaign cycle, so covering the 2020 presidential election. And I initially started using SnapStream as a way to cover Trump, which was part of my beat at Think Progress, and so I would watch all of the White House press briefings and Trump speeches, congressional hearings, and I quickly found out just from posting video clips and realizing that there was such an appetite for them that I could make it part of my beat as a political journalist, not only writing about events, but actually sharing kind of the source material in a way with video clips that people could then watch themselves, share, and get a sense beyond people describing what was happening and actually see it. And so, now it's become kind of a whole, clipping is like a vital part of what I do in terms of not only the newsletter, but, what I'm doing on social media. And so on a week-to-week basis, that involves every Sunday watching all the various Sunday news shows, Face the Nation, Meet the Press, This Week, and posting highlights from those. This morning, I watched a congressional hearing from Jim Jordan's weaponization committee and posted some highlights because, the fact of the matter is that a lot of my followers and readers just don't have time to immerse themselves in, like a 5-hour hearing. And so that's kind of where I come in. And as I've done this, over the course of, I guess it's been almost like 7 years now that I've been posting clips on social media, you kind of get, almost an eye for what is going to pop, what's going to be viral. It's kind of what makes for a good clip, and that can be more of an art than a science for sure. But I think, when you have all of the reps that I have had over the years, you get better at that. And so now as we, kind of round the corner into this 2024 campaign cycle, obviously there's big news this morning about debates happening next month already. And so, I really, on a day-to-day basis, I have my SnapStream multi-viewer open so I can watch, at least 4 different channels at once or different streams. And I just try and have my eye kind of on everything while still leaving a little bit of time, hopefully, to write and edit the newsletter. That can sometimes be difficult to juggle those different obligations that I have. But, certainly I view news clipping as a vital part of my beat. And it's really helped me, build the audience that I built over the years, which allowed me eventually to go independent.
Yeah, that's awesome, Aaron. Thanks for the background. You have a clip that you want to show us, I think, and talk about.
Sure. And Brennan, I think you have that queued up, the clip that I sent. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, great. I sent the clip from this is JD Vance last Sunday on one of the Sunday shows. And the reason I picked this clip actually lives on Threads, not on X. And that's part of the reason that I picked this particular clip is because SnapStream is not only useful for posting clips on, I still call it Twitter, but X. But I also use SnapStream to post clips on Threads. And, with this more fractured social media environment that we're in, I've tried to kind of build toeholds across, multiple different platforms, whether it be Blue Sky, Threads, Substack Notes, even Mastodon, places like that. And so you can see, although you can't see the engagement numbers here on the screen share, I think this particular clip had like over 4,000 likes and something like 400 shares. on Threads, and yeah, you can see right there it has 4,300 likes and over 400 reposts. And so this is just part of my workflow on a typical Sunday, watching all of the various Sunday news shows, and in this clip in particular, which we can play at least a snippet of. And actually, Brian was just talking about being at CNN and talking with people there. This was a clip where I thought Dana Bash, as the host of State of the Union on CNN, did a really good job kind of calling out JD Vance. And because she did that so effectively, the clip really took off.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing audio here. I don't know if there is on the other side of this, but
yeah.
I'll throw it in the chat for folks to click on as well.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, the caption kind of tells the story where JD Vance, who obviously is trying to become Trump's vice president, made a comment defending him against accusations of anti-Semitism, and Dana Bash simply pointed out that he had dinner with an about anti-Semite, and that's the sort of back and forth that can be kind of the stuff of the Sunday shows, in the sense that you want to see politicians being held to account, and it's an opportunity for someone like JD Vance, who wouldn't normally go on CNN, to try and defend his positions and what he's doing politically. And I thought in that case, because Dana Bash did a good job pushing back, it really made for a good clip. I think that one, I boiled it down to something like a 90-second clip. And, I posted a whole thread on Threads of highlights from that interview. And, that's part of my workflow. And it's a way that I've built a following across various platforms, not only in a political campaign context, but just, even in times when campaigns aren't as active as they are right now.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested in asking you and Curtis and Murphy more about Threads in particular, and just how that network is developing. So Curtis, over to you. Curtis is the Associate Director of Digital Engagement at the Center for American Progress. And so, no, I'm sorry, NewsBusters Managing Editor. Apologies. So Curtis, let me hand it off to you and give us your background. Sorry, I screwed that up, but
we switched. Murphy and I switched jobs, I guess.
Let me be clear. These are two organizations that are not often mistaken for one another. And so Curtis, over to you.
Yeah, Rakesh. Yeah. So a lot of things I think I'll be talking about, Murphy and I definitely have in common. So I'm the managing editor of NewsBusters, the main outfit of the Media Research Center. If you haven't heard of us that way, you probably heard of us this way. I've been with NewsBusters for coming up on a decade now. This June will be 10 years, and we've been a client of SnapStream since 2009. So we were early on board supporters of SnapStream, and it is central to my job. And before that, we were using VHS tapes and DVDs, starting and stopping, and having to type out transcripts the old-fashioned way, which I'll get into in a second. We like to measure the media from a conservative perspective in two different ways: qualitative and quantitative. And the qualitative front, the foundation for everything we do that involves a live stream or a moment from a cable or TV broadcast, is a transcript, because we believe that you can disagree with our analysis, and probably a lot of people on here do, but the point is, at the bottom of all of our stories, we provide a full transcript of the relevant segments. And we are able to do that because of the live closed captioning capture via SnapStream, and more recently via the use of live streams from congressional hearings, Washington Post lives. So in other words, events that are not part of Fox News, C-SPAN, CNBC, you name it, a traditional broadcast outfit or cable outfit. We are able to capture those moments as well with live closed captioning. And transcripts are also the basis of our studies in terms of labeling coverage that we have in a positive or negative way towards candidates. But a more recent example is a study from one of my colleagues, April 15th, looking at how party ID was attached to the prosecutors in each of the 4 Trump trials, either on air in the chyrons and through the use of all of these shows, and the video themselves. We were able to tabulate that up. One of my beats, many of you may have heard of me before, is the White House press briefings. And I like to think that's definitely where SnapStream has given me a leg up on everyone else, chronicling the worst and best moments. I know what Brian was talking about with Paula Reed during the Trump years. She was definitely someone that I would be sharing her quotes in real time. So I think I'm going to move to my clip, Brennan, with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go.
Yep. So that I call this Ducey time because for my audience, this is something that they're definitely interested in, what Peter Ducey is asking Karine Jean-Pierre on a daily basis. So this is what the finished product looks like. A few years ago, I decided to move towards just providing the raw transcript to, just allow people of any political persuasion to engage with my tweet. More of my followers are right of center, so they're going to react in a more negative sense towards Karine or positive way towards Peter Ducey. But at the very least, I wanted to provide the raw transcript without any sort of schooling or owned or pwned, any partisan analysis other than a kind of little Ducey time thing there at the beginning. And I'm able to do that using the rough closed captioning that I'm able to clean up and apply the name titles to each name there. And also, I should also note there, since we just got to the end of the clip, a more recent update to SnapStream allows us to include branding in all of our social media posts. So we have able to add the bumper to the end of our videos, and we're able to add our bulldog to the top right corner. We affectionately call that the Benny for certain reasons. That we're able to include in all of our supercuts so that we can track that. As you can see, it gets 3.6 million views. And then it goes on as well, because with SnapStream, something that we all have seen, that when you have SnapStream, you can link your Twitter accounts to your SnapStream account. So these posts and videos are coming directly from SnapStream. And once one post is published, we are able to create a thread option to tie them all together into one nice longer video. And finally moving on briefly to the quantitative analysis, it's something we take great pride in at NewsBusters because we are able to, in real time, count the hours, minutes, and seconds certain newscasts spend on a particular topic. A study that I'm working on that'll be coming out in the next week or two is network coverage of the Trump hush money trial, looking at all coverage on the morning, evening, and Sunday roundtable shows, ABC, CBS, and NBC, with the live, time count. Good Morning America, for example, starts at 7 a.m. and it counts down to the second. With SnapStream, we're able to count down to the second how much time a news segment runs for about a particular subject before they move on to the next. For example, we've been able to create this using all of our evening newscasts from 2023. We found that only 24% of coverage on the network newscast in the Republican primary consisted of policy discussions. So while people may have misconceptions in closing about us, with the use of SnapStream, we're really able to show our work. And I think that's what really separates us from other websites.
That's awesome, Curtis. I'm going to see if you'll share with us later why he's called Benny the Bulldog. But Murphy, I'm excited to have you here. You are the Associate Director of Digital Engagement at CAP, the Center for American Progress, where Aaron, worked at earlier in his career at the Think Progress website. So Murphy, please, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and share with us what you do.
Hi, folks. Excited to chat with everyone today. I'm Murphy Burke, and I'm at CAP Action, which is the advocacy arm of the think tank Center for American Progress. I sometimes joke that they do the think and we do the tank, but essentially we are focused on taking the information that our experts are analyzing and turning it into action and information for Americans out there that may not be as willing to read a white paper. It's our goal to reach people. We have an audience that's diverse across TikTok, X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. And I do a lot of the rapid response for them, which means using SnapStream a lot. We use SnapStream to reach people and tell them about how President Biden and Democrats are working to improve their lives and some of the threats posed by folks on the other side. When I was onboarded, we already had SnapStream, so I was excited to come into that. Not to reveal my age, but my sort of early career alternative was using iPhone's screen recording tool, which meant that live clipping was really happening hours after an event just because of the time that took. So very excited to learn how SnapStream could make it that we were wrapping up a live clipping operation about real time to when a speech was ending. And so since then, I've been digging in to learn a lot more about what we can do with SnapStream, like pulling in live feeds and using it as a tool to aid our captioning, our closed captions that are on videos to keep them accessible. So a lot of the job is monitoring the Biden speeches, but we also monitor a lot of non-political shows. I go through the list of guests for shows like The Kelly Clarkson Show, The View, which is quite political, but sort of those daytime talk shows, as well as evening late night shows, to sort of see who the guests are going to be and which ones I need to be able to go into SnapStream and grab a clip either live or the next day after it aired. So the clip that I'm sharing today is from Jimmy Kimmel. It was his monologue that he did soon after an interview that Trump had given with Time Magazine came out. They had done a series of interviews, and there were a lot of things that were in it that were pretty controversial and pretty extreme, but on other platforms where we were able to share screenshots from the article or a link to the article, our Instagram audience we knew wasn't going to be very responsive to that. And so that's where SnapStream came in handy, that when we saw that the interview was mentioned in Jimmy Kimmel's monologue, I was able to go in the next day, grab this clip of it and caption it and get it up, and even crop it to that 9:16, all within SnapStream. So there's a lot of good options to be able to get information. We call it remixing. So like this was one event that happened, but we shared it both by sharing the actual article, sharing people talking about it, etc. And this is one example of it that performed pretty well and brought this information to an audience that otherwise maybe wasn't exposed to news about this.
Yeah, that's awesome, Murphy. Murphy, how many clips do you guys post, per week on average, would you say?
I'd say weekly we're turning out on like X and Threads, we are turning out probably a dozen or more clips. Pretty much anytime President Biden is discussing something that falls into one of our buckets, we're captioning it. And then from beyond there, we also have like a pretty good operation of clipping things, even if we aren't posting them instantly. That's not today's discussion, but on Instagram, things have a longer tail and the audience isn't as strict about timeliness. So you can use SnapStream also to store those up and save them for a day where there isn't a lot of news.
Right. So the first question I have for all of you is you're all practitioners in this world of short clips, right? We heard Brian's setup, that now this is the norm, right? We live in a culture that is normalized to these short video clips as a way to be informed and keep in touch with what's going on. So as practitioners, how do you find where something interesting might be happening? What are you keeping tabs on to decide, hey, I'm going to go deeper on this? Like Murphy, you talked about Biden speeches. How do you actually go and figure out where all those speeches are going to be happening, for example? But yeah, how do you start with this universe of events that are happening on television, not on television, and then, start to narrow in on what you might want to focus on? And I'll invite anyone to start it out. Aaron, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I can speak on that. One really good resource, if you're interested in tracking political news in the way that Rakesh is kind of talking about there, is actually the C-SPAN homepage. Because on a daily basis, I'll have a schedule of congressional events, presidential speeches, things like that. And so from there, once I know something is happening, I kind of, usually just mentally will kind of have an idea of what the day is going to entail for political events. And then, one thing that SnapStream has these days that actually is a really excellent feature that I've only become more accustomed with over the last year or so is the ability to use YouTube streams. With a couple clicks of the button, you can basically pull it into SnapStream, and so you get the live video, which you can set ins and outs and clip just right from SnapStream, which is really easy to do. So, for instance, like today, I mentioned earlier the weaponization hearing that Jim Jordan chairs this committee, and they had a hearing this morning. And so that isn't the type of thing that is going to be carried by like a Fox News or a Newsmax or a CNN. And so what I did, I knew that was happening. And then, we live in a world, thankfully, where, almost any event like that, you can find a stream of, especially if it's a big congressional hearing in DC. And so all I did is I went to YouTube, I searched, the weaponization committee. I think it's a subcommittee of like the oversight committee. So I went to the oversight committee page and then, pulled up the live stream, pulled that into SnapStream and just live tweeted it right from there. So for me, I think everybody kind of has their own technique, but I'm in the habit every morning of going to the C-SPAN homepage and just looking at their daily scheduled political events, kind of starting there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I use the multi-viewer within SnapStream to have my eyes on cable all day. So I usually have CNN, MSNBC, Fox News and Fox Business, and Newsmax up. And so, for instance, if like a Byron Donalds goes on Newsmax, I see that out of the corner of my eye. I pull up the Newsmax feed, and then I can clip right from there. So, it's kind of just having eyes on everything that you can, but then also being intentional. And for me, that involves, I find C-SPAN to be a really good resource just for having kind of a list of events each day.
What's the most unexpected place that you've pulled a clip from, or that you've ended up watching, that isn't broadcast television, and maybe something you hadn't accessed before? Murphy,
in terms of like I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, someone else. I thought you asked that to me. Go ahead.
I found a stream of the Weather Channel when they were discussing climate change once and was able to pull that in. They had a mention of President Biden as well. And like the Weather Channel isn't generally what you think of as the most political, but got a good clip out of that.
Oh, wow. Super interesting.
Mm-hmm. We did that as well. I was gonna say we saw that as well. Yeah, that was definitely not something on your radar. I usually tune in for weather on the 8th, but that's it. For me, I think it's very similar actually to Aaron. I should just touch on the multi-view facet of SnapStream. It's almost like Back to the Future Part 2, if anybody has seen that movie, where there's 4 different things on the TV. That's really similar to what SnapStream offers, where you have the ability to pick 4 different things and watch them all in real time. And a number of folks on the team utilize that, past and present as well. For us, in terms of what is relevant and things that we're interested in terms of like our workflow, there are some like traditional stalwart shows that we watch every single day. As I mentioned in my remarks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, while the viewership for these newscasts are down compared to what they were in the 90s or 80s, they are still far more watched just from a pure rating standpoint than even Tucker Carlson or Bill O'Reilly at his height. So the information that goes out on those shows or isn't covered is extremely relevant. And as we talk about a really particularly close presidential election like we've had the last pretty much most of our lifetimes, more often than not. So we have those shows that we watch, the networks, because they are the foundation of all of our studies and stand-ins, because tracking CNN live from 5 a.m. to midnight Eastern is quite a lot. We still do those numerical and qualitative studies, but it takes way more time and manpower than we have as a nimble nonprofit. And also issues is another thing that we kind of narrow our focus, and guest is another one as well. Or agree with Murphy about late night comedy shows, Kelly Clarkson shows. Those guest lists are published in advance, and with SnapStream they capture the little info part on your cable or YouTube TV. When you click on a show and it lists a bunch of names, SnapStream has that included as well, so we know ahead of time if someone is on to talk about their new book, or like Drew Barrymore and the vice president the other week. We see those things in advance. And finally, issues, as I alluded to earlier, about things that our readers are interested in, the Biden family, issues regarding abortion, taxes, really all sorts of run the gauntlet. The border are particularly of interest to our readers. And with the closed captioning, we're able to kind of go within a newscast and find those key moments and then slow down and listen to them more closely. And for me, with the White House press briefing, my day is kind of built around that, as it's my main beat when I'm not editing or writing or appearing on these other shows. And for questions, finally, I look for what's the news of the day and where the exchanges kind of go back and forth. If you start to notice patterns and reporters say that question hasn't been answered and they get asked again, I feel like I'm kind of on to something. And again, I tweet them out, just the quote and the reply, because I know that the reporters in the room care. I've been told that before, and just know that, they're asking the right question, that somebody out there, as Brian noted in his remarks, it's not just going and ending. The thread continues.
Yeah, one thing
oh, sorry.
I was just going to tag on. Go ahead, Murphy. You're up.
I wanted to drop a quick mention of the alerts feature on SnapStream. That's big for me when I don't have the time to go in and actively search, that I get alerts when guests that I know deliver are booked on shows, as well as, since we have recordings constantly going of cable news, when the kind of pundits that come on and really are able to get right to the facts are introduced, their name sends an alert so that I know to go and look at that recording. So the alerts feature also gives you a good opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to just mention, this is sort of from the lab at SnapStream, but one of the things that we've discovered that LLMs, this new technology that's fueling, our broad interests societally in AI, that it's really good at when it comes to transcripts is identifying speakers. It's pretty good at feeding it in a transcript and saying, hey, tell me everybody who was a speaker inside the show. So I don't know when or if it'll end up in the product, but there is something really interesting there and powerful there with LLMs. But yeah, Murphy, how do you, apart from alerts, what are the ways that you track and keep your pulse on what's happening in order to make sure that you get the stuff that you're looking for?
A lot of what folks have others said, I check the C-SPAN homepage. FactBase, in collaboration with Roll Call, has the president's public daily schedule every day, so you can sort of see what the timing is going to be of that. And then also, when searching SnapStream, I want to go a little bit ahead of what's on the guide. I'll use tvlineups.com to just go through show by show and see who the guests are going to be each week.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious how all of you play off of one another in this media ecosystem, and I don't necessarily mean specifically each of you, but there's a group of you. The Twitter cliposphere is sometimes what I've heard it described as, who generate all of these short clips on Twitter. Yeah, how do you play off of one another?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. When I started doing this in 2017, there weren't that many accounts doing it, and so there was a lot of space, and I didn't feel kind of the need that I do now, where the person who probably works in closest proximity to me is Asen, because we end up clipping a lot of the same events, and I know he and I, sometimes we're even DMing on the side, and we know that we're watching the same event. And so there is kind of a little bit of a race, because you get that clip up even 30 seconds later, and if it's a good clip, the person who has it up first is probably going to be the one that really gains traction and has it become kind of like the clip of something, as opposed to one that just doesn't really spread that far on whether it be Threads or X. So yeah, it's become a much more saturated area, just as more and more people have the technology to clip. And I think as people kind of increasingly understood the power of these clips to kind of drive a news cycle and build audiences. And so, there is kind of like a clipper's code, I would say, and just in the sense that if someone's posting the exact same clip as you did 5 minutes later and they follow you, it's kind of like a little bit of poor form. But at the same time, I mean, journalists cover events from a variety of different standpoints. And so there's always different ways to add value. Like ASIN, for instance, posts a lot of clips that have kind of like direct quotes. And sometimes I'll try and add some context to them, just to have something a little bit different. Or, you can do captions that are either more, again, like quoting very directly, or kind of riffing on something to try and entice people to watch it without necessarily telling them what they're going to be watching. So yeah, I mean, it is a crowded, it's a crowded area, but I try to kind of establish my own little niche, and that's part of one of the beautiful things about SnapStream is that it makes it really easy to post clips, especially on Twitter, very quickly, and so that does give myself a leg up versus other people who are doing similar work who might not have access to the best tools.
Yeah, definitely, and I think what Aaron says is right about there's multiple different ways to go about sharing clips. You can do direct quotes, you can have paraphrasing, you can have your, I guess, more partisan analysis that you're kind of putting a thumb on what you think is happening. And I think amongst, at least on my side of the aisle, Clippers, we all kind of discuss the same sort of thing. It's really about what unique trait can you bring to the table. In speed is just one of them. Are you able to bring in the knowledge of who is speaking? That's one of the things I like to pride myself on watching the White House press briefings since the last year of the Obama administration in 2016. When a reporter is called on in the third row, I'm able to say that is this person from, Real Clear Politics or Bloomberg, and that can kind of shape how some users, not everybody, but some people may react to the clip and engage with the clip. Or if I'm able to say that 3 of the 4 broadcast networks all ask the same question, and kind of how that plays off each other as well. So, and in terms of, I think we all, for the most part, most of us know the rules of the road, and we all kind of are pretty respectful about it. But there are just certain clips that are just so big, like the upcoming presidential debate in June. That's going to be something where we're all going to have the same clip. But in terms of engagement, it's really not just about speed, but what do you offer and what do you bring to the table? So that really brings in writing. While the tweets and the moments are small, even though you can have really long tweets now, we try to avoid that. It's really what do you creatively bring to the table?
How do you, and also you collaborate with a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Curtis, you're one person, but you've got other people as well. How are you guys coordinating in real time?
Yeah, in real time, fortunately, probably a little more than half of us are all in-house, so we're able to talk to each other in person. And we all have dedicated shows we watch. Just like a newsroom will have people covering business or in Wall Street, or people covering abortion or foreign policy, we have people covering certain networks in particular. So that's how we kind of are able to not step on each other. One of my colleagues, Alex Christie, for example, his beats is the late night comedy shows. That's the first thing he watches in the morning. So we know that he becomes an expert in that field, just like at Murphy or any think tank, somebody's going to do the economy, but may not know the same thing about Russia.
And
yeah, that's awesome, Murphy.
A multi-team approach, especially when live clipping. We will have a couple different people if it's a big event like a debate or the State of the Union. And a lot of that is dividing up the different segments that go into clipping. So one person is just getting the clip and another person is working on writing the copy or getting that into its final form as a tweet. So like dividing up works pretty well with this like integrated SnapStream workflow. And as an organization where we have to get approvals, we also will sort of have clips clipped and then somebody else looking at them to make sure that it matches the goals that they imagine too, and just to quality assess.
And how do you play off of the Murphy at CAP, the broader narrative and other people who are creating short form clips in the ecosystem?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say about the non-Twitter and X platforms is that the algorithm on TikTok and even Instagram Reels to an extent has gotten so specific that when our analytics folks have looked at videos that are very similar, like similar clips that are on Reels, posted by two different accounts, they're reaching different people. So like it is a little bit of assurance that, you know, more people is not a problem. It's simply just getting it in front of more eyes if a single clip is going out in a couple different places on those. And then I think what the other panelists have said about added context on Twitter and X, different folks have different context to offer. We often will take like a clip that maybe cites a piece of our data. President Biden will sometimes cite it and be able to just add in that link where another clip from someone else wouldn't have the link to the data source.
Got it. One thing that all of you have talked about is tapping into sources outside of broadcast television, outside of a TV interview or a debate that happens that's available on television. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Where, you know, I'm really interested in how the media ecosystem is being, you know, has been broadened outside of broadcast television, and how that, you know, gets packaged up, repurposed to, you know, get wide audience with the public. So what are some of those places that you're going, you know, outside of broadcast television to get content?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit.
Aaron, you talked, for example,
Sure.
This hearing this morning that you were looking for,
Yeah.
but, you know, I'm just curious
Right.
for a more complete picture of what that looks like.
Yeah, well, you know, and it's a very there's a lot to talk about there. I mean, another one like that comes to mind is at least in the beat that I cover, kind of covering the American right and the Republican Party, like Steve Bannon's podcast is one that is not carried on broadcast. You can find streams of it occasionally on YouTube, and so depending on guests that he has, I'll pull that up and watch, you know, to see newsmaking interviews. There's a gold mine. I mean, I had a clip yesterday that actually resulted from and this actually was not one that I got via SnapStream because the event had already happened, but a legislative source here in Minnesota thought that a particular exchange during a debate over a bill was newsworthy and was something that was kind of up my alley and alerted me to it. So I went back and pulled a clip from YouTube on that. And so, you know, I get tips all the time from people, you know, because I can't watch everything. And sometimes they'll be on broadcast TV, on cable. Sometimes they'll be on YouTube streams. You know, that's one of the great things about, you know, doing this work in 2024 is that pretty much anything that's ever been put on tape, you know, that's more than, you know, something that you shoot on your phone, for instance, but like a show of some sort. I mean, it's on YouTube probably, or you can find it streaming. And so, you know, there's a lot of different ways to find stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm getting tips all the time from political sources, from people who just happen to have a TV on or be listening to something. I mean, there are ways even that I can using like I use TVI sometimes to get radio broadcasts and find clips that are on like a public radio station or something like that. So you're absolutely right, Rakesh, that, you know, it's not even, you know, as much as it was 6-7 years ago where it felt like kind of everything was on cable. These days, you know, like for Trump rallies, even for instance, they're pretty reliably on Newsmax, but a lot of the time you have to get them from like Right Side Broadcasting, which kind of has all the trappings of a cable network, but isn't on cable. So yeah, I mean, it's just, I think you just have to be aware if you're doing this work that, you know, you're not going to get everything that you need from cable, and then just have the versatility and the tools, you know, whether it be SnapStream or other, you know, sometimes it can be as kind of basic as a screen recorder on your phone. Other ways to clip things, get that video, and then, you know, use it either on social media or in my case, sometimes in my newsletter.
Yeah, I think the key is persistence. Like, for example, yes, the Steve Bannon show, Real America's Voice, SnapStream has a stream you're able to set up a stream for that. My boss, Tim Graham, testified last week before the House Energy and Commerce Committee about National Public Radio. That, for example, was not carried on regular C-SPAN. So we were able to find the YouTube/live stream of the committee hearing. And with my boss, Brent Baker, and Miguel from our IT team, one or both of them are usually able to upload that to SnapStream and carry it live or upload it after the fact. Like Don Lemon, for example, has this new show, and we're able to record those episodes and put those in and feed them into SnapStream as well. So it's really about what you're looking for. And just one other point I think is really important to mention is creating these moments. Those of us that go on to then write blog posts or have a newsletter, for me at least, it is helped me tremendously focus my thought, you know, in a short tweet or a short transcript, putting it out. And before I even see how well the post does, it just gives me an idea of like having to think, this is how should my story be structured, and what information do I need and what information I don't need.
I'll drop a word of advice to rapid response people out there that sometimes while like planning and preparation is great, sometimes what getting these live stream means is putting aside 5 minutes before the event that you're wanting to find. And that's when your search occurs. Like the YouTube streams aren't up and going, the search results aren't super accessible. And then once it's time to go, that's when you start to see that that's where you start to see it popping up places where it's available.
Yeah, and Curtis, I remember you're mentioning something yesterday when we were doing, or day before yesterday, we did a pre-call that part of what you do is you're able to transcribe the video in real time. So, you know, you not only get it into SnapStream, but you're able to actually navigate it using the transcript like you can for TV programs. Is that, did I remember that correctly?
Yeah,
Maybe you all do that actually.
Yeah, I mean, being able to search via keywords and being able for us, since I was saying earlier, the transcript is the foundation to everything we do. That is the first thing we teach our interns that'll be starting next week, how to make a transcript, how to, you know, count time, basically, how to set parameters for your segments, what is important, not just for the video that accompanies your story, but also if you choose to share it on social media, like what is, you know, you don't share the entire 5-minute segment, but what does it look like? What's important? What do you share right before, right after to get the proper context? But yes, the transcript is really important. And also what Murphy says as well about citation from our studies or someone else with our organization, being able to click and share that for everyone from supporters to our readers, to our donors, to even our family members.
All right, so we're going to switch over to some Q&A from the audience. I'm going to start with the
Thank you, audience.
Yes, and keep the questions coming. If you have any, just put them in the chat, DM them to one of us. So I have a question here from Aaron, and his question is, can you all discuss searching and capturing more local sources, local TV news, city council meetings, state regulatory body hearings, etc.?
I can speak to that a little bit, but it might be a little beyond the parameters of this conversation because I don't use Snap a ton for that. There are other tools that kind of provide more of like a, it's like a resource that you can draw from after the fact to find clips, because it would just be overwhelming to try to record all of that, you know? I mean, right. So you have to be kind of intentional within Snap or have recordings set, whereas like, there have been times, for instance, like I can think of one occasion where when Trump was campaigning in 2020 and he came through Minnesota, he did an interview with the local ABC affiliate news station.
Right.
And there's a way to, you know, either you can find those things sometimes on just like the website of that, you know, of a news station, or there are other ways to find clips, like, you know, TV Eyes is a pretty good resource for that. So I try to have, you know, it gets back to kind of what Curtis said, where persistence and like just having different tools that you can get content from. But to be honest, I mean, I cover mainly national stuff. So there will be times where, again, like a national politician will do a local interview and there'll be news that's relevant. And myself these days living in Minnesota, like I'm a little bit more focused on Minnesota issues. And so, you know, for instance, like I mentioned earlier, I posted a clip yesterday from a legislative debate here in the state legislature. And so I'll do things like that. But, you know, for my median reader is most interested in national politics, and, you know, Snap provides all the tools I need for that.
Yeah, just my quick answer is with SnapStream, you record all these different channels for us locally, and with you guys where you guys are headquartered in Houston. The broadcast networks were already recording, so we can very easily add a recording for the local newscast if there's something relevant to us. But otherwise, I'm pretty similar to Aaron in terms of a national focus. But all of this discussion about streams would also then apply if that's what your mission is.
And when there's a big thing that happened on like local news that makes it into the national news, I do use the SnapStream search filter to or search option to look for that person's name to see if more than what I've seen online is available, if, one of the cable news networks aired a bigger portion and there's more that I want to share. So you can kind of, once it's already risen to that level, seek it out using SnapStream. But again, I cover mostly national news, so that isn't a big part of my workflow.
Yeah, I think Curtis, while everybody here kind of has a more of a national mandate, your point that, look, if it's a stream on the internet, then it can be ingested into SnapStream. And I'll also, amplify what you said, Aaron, which is it's pretty common for people to have, I've seen in the field, most people have a TVIs or something like that subscription, a national media monitoring service that's in 210 DMAs, as a complement to SnapStream, as a sort of something that provides breadth, but really doesn't have the depth of, workflow and capabilities that that SnapStream has in terms of being able to clip and edit and post. So that's pretty common. Okay, another question here is from Eric. This is specifically for you, Aaron, and everyone else is feel free to chime in. But you were invited to the Biden White House along with other digital journalists. How does the Biden administration think about digital clips and sound bites? Do they see it as a net negative or a net positive for getting their message out? And any other insights that you can talk about from the visit?
Yeah, I've been there twice for events that they have with journalists and influencers. The most recent one was just before the State of the Union this year. Which again, this is something that every White House does just to, kind of get their word out, schmooze a little bit with people that they view as being, if not allied journalists, then people who are at least sympathetic to what they're trying to say. And I think the Biden White House. My only experiences covering White Houses are, well, I covered the very tail end of Obama, but I wasn't really up and running as a clipper. Clearly, the Trump administration wasn't feeding me tips, although I did have a couple sources there that we chat off the record, but never really in a capacity where they were like giving me content to work with. But the White House, the Biden White House has a whole team of people that do outreach to digital journalists, and so I have a number of sources in the White House. That used to actually kind of flag a lot of clips for me if they would see something. Hey, did you see Comer on Newsmax? This or that. But now they kind of have their own in-house ways of doing that. And then on the campaign side, they have this Biden HQ account, which does a lot of video clipping work and rapid response. And so I feel like I've been a little bit boxed out. I don't hear from people quite as much as I used to. In terms of some of those people have left to go work on the campaign now, and so it's just kind of a different ball game. But I think, between myself, people like Brian Tyler Cohen, the Midas Touch guys, there's kind of a whole universe of progressive journalists and people doing video clips, influencers, and they've been kind of amazingly, I think, proactive and, trying to be in touch with us, whether that's just to kind of hear what we're seeing. I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as talking with someone at the White House to kind of get a sense in your circles of what people are talking about, or whether it's again to send tips, whether that's stuff that's been on TV or in some cases Biden speeches coming up and things to be aware of in circumstances like that.
Murphy, Curtis, anything to add in terms of official engagement with the White House or government agencies around the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that just generally our experience has been, we can't as directly work with, or we don't at all directly work with the campaign, but like the White House is dedicated to making sure that the information about some of this key legislation is getting out to, a wider audience than people watching the Sunday news shows. And so folks like Aaron, and I think to a certain extent us here at CAP, are a part of sort of making that transition from news to broad, like to a broader audience, and the White House is on board with that.
Yeah, and from the conservative side of things, absolutely. I think, on the Hill, that's the same sort of thing. I think collectively in the last, 5-6 years of realization that creating these clips and moments, and getting these remarks shared on social media beyond just, as we said at the beginning, like a white paper, the realization that these kind of things are way more impactful, and can resonate with more people. I mean, I'm a nerd. I'm willing to read that stuff anyway, but like to have that information as digestible as possible, the necessity of having a strong rapid response team, beyond just graphics, video, is what people engage in on not just X or Instagram, Threads, all those accounts that we talked about.
Okay, so last question, and then we'll wrap this up. This is a question from Eric Weisbrod. Right now, what is the most relevant social network for sharing live video clips?
I can start with that. I still think it's Twitter/X. You know, as Curtis kind of touched upon earlier, I mean, I think they have the best tools in terms of being able to post longer tweets and longer videos. You can do that also on Threads. My experience on Threads was that I was quite excited about it at first. Over the first couple of months on there, you know, I went from obviously no following at all to about like 160,000 followers, and now like over a year later, I'm at like 170. And part of that is they've just throttled political content where outside of people who are following you, people just aren't seeing it. And so, you know, I still think that in some ways, as ironic as this might sound, given everything we know about Elon Musk, Twitter/X is still kind of the most fair platform where, you know, if you have engaging content, it'll reach eyeballs and you can grow a following. So yeah, and then, you know, of course, Blue Sky doesn't really have video capabilities. What I found is kind of a workaround on there is that when I post videos on Threads, you can just put the URL into Blue Sky, and then if people click on it, it will redirect them to the video, and they don't even have to have an account. So that's one way to kind of get video into Blue Sky, even though you can't directly embed it. So yeah, those are the three. And then I use Substack Notes, which, because I'm on Substack, it's a really good way to build kind of subscribers and readers within Substack, although it's not as popular with like the general public. But yeah, I mean, still my experience is that I'm spending most of my time both as a someone who's posting content, but then also consuming it on Twitter.
Yeah, I still think individually X is still the place to be, just for me personally. I think before, as Aaron talks about, you know, Threads, Instagram, Meta in general, just kind of more started throttling political content. Things like Instagram and Facebook would be, I think, more the preferred experience if you talk to our folks in our marketing social media team as an organization to get posts and messages across, compared to X, that my individual tweets might do a lot better. But whereas on Facebook, they're much more comfortable kind of deriving and measuring a lot more of their success based on Facebook.
And we view both platforms as a good place to message to the messengers. So talking to people who are politically engaged and giving them information and content that they can share with people either on that platform or outside of it, that, you know, are in their network that they know personally that may not be politically engaged. And so for us, Threads have been pretty successful because that's a place that's pretty dominated by progressives right now. We are guaranteed when we're releasing something, it's sort of hitting the audience that wants to see it. And from there, those folks are taking what they're getting on Threads and sharing it to Instagram, where you get that more apolitical audience.
Well, I think that's our time. And I want to give a big thank you to Murphy, Curtis, and Aaron for sharing all these great insights with us. You guys are master practitioners, and so it's a real gift to learn from all of you. And thanks to the audience for all the questions and for spending this hour with us. And with that, goodbye, and thank you very much.